how you use your brand and the power of your brand to build community. We all know that's so important as we bring our businesses to market every day. Discuss a little bit about what happens when maybe you need to change your brand. So I think it'll be very interesting. So as Cole mentioned, with us we have two very esteemed guests. Lauren Gross, and she is the digital marketing lead for Chic Geek, right? Lauren works to grow the number of women in tech services, in the tech space, through thought leadership and compelling content that she builds. She's also the founder, as Cole mentioned, of a Calgary-based marketing agency called Lauren Natalie Designs, right? And they work with small businesses and solopreneurs to build, to really build and embrace their brands and then find their voice digitally. So welcome, Lauren. We also have Aislinn Grant, as Cole mentioned. She's the co-founder, actually the creative director and co-founder of Grant, which is a design studio specializing in really bold and typographically focused brand identities, building that work for brands. Self-taught designer, but she's built and created a firm that's known for its, I'm going to read this, quirky ideas. I think this is awesome. Quirky ideas, but also disruptive messaging. So I think that's great. And while she does work a lot with smaller businesses and solopreneurs, she's also worked with businesses like Lululemon and WestJet. And both of our guests are dedicated to helping small business owners and solopreneurs really kind of expand and discover on their journey. So thank you again for both being here.
Thank you.
This is great. So let's dig into this right now. Brand. Such a big word. When we think about brand, a lot of people think about Nike or Coca-Cola or Apple, right? These big global consumer brands that have kind of, we were just talking about, been through it all, the ups and downs, and they're still resilient, still out there, still very powerful. But if you break it down, across any size business, across any industry, there's got to be some common threads, some common characteristics that make a brand strong and resilient and powerful. In your opinions, what are those common traits?
So when we're thinking about brands, like you said, there's so many definitions out there. What really I find is my definition of a brand is an understanding of the community that your company serves. So for the example you said, Nike doesn't serve shoe wearers, they serve athletes. And there's a big difference there, and that really comes across in their brand and how they portray themselves. And so it comes back to a lot of what are your values and who are the people you are selling to, engaging with, and through that, what community are you building? So that's kind of my perception of brand from a bit more of an execution side. Aislinn knows a lot more about the building of the brand side.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I was going to say is I think, all of our clients that have done it really well, and unfortunately we have had clients fail as well. I think that the common denominator between the successful ones is they have really strong values that they execute really well. And I think sometimes that comes down to knowing your demographic really well, but not just kind of randomly choosing a demographic that you're like 20 to 35, women that shop Lululemon. That's random. I think when you really get down to the nitty gritty, understand who your kind of brand, we call them champions, but you could say like a brand nerd. Like Apple has done really well because they target to the nerdiest of their customers. I think Nike is the same. Patagonia is the same. All of those kind of like larger corporations have done really well because they serve a very specific group of people that are like a cult-like following. And our clients, and even the small business clients that have done really well, have really strong values. They have researched their demographic, and then they target those people that I think are their nerdiest customers that will carry them through hard times. And I think that when you have a really strong brand, it's not necessarily about your logo, it's about all the different pieces of your brand, from how you're greeted when you walk in the door, what your business card stock is made out of, what's the vibe when you come into the office. All of those things are kind of determined by values. So I think all businesses should start there, and we always say that a value is not a value unless you put time, energy, and money behind it. So I think, when you've done that, then I think you're on the right track.
Awesome. There was a session before where they talked a bit about doubling and even tripling down on your most ardent fans, your most ardent customers, whether you're a B2B or B2C, large or small. So that's something that I feel like you're advocating as well. You're really learning from those people.
Yeah, and I think, there's lots of examples of people that diversify too early. I think especially if you're a small business, niching and really focusing on the thing that people come to you for before you expand is really smart. Even huge companies like Lego, they almost went bankrupt because they diversified and opened up like theme parks and clothing stores, and then that almost bankrupted them. They got a new CEO who came in and said, scrap all of that. Now we're just going to focus on helping the new generation of builders develop. And I think like having a strong mission like that really carried them forward, and now they can diversify, and now that they have that kind of nerdy, niche group that they can market to, but without it, I think, you've got to stay focused.
Yeah, cool. You both mentioned values too. Like, how do you get that out of your clients? Like, how do you help them identify what their values are? You start a business, you grow it, it's really great, but then you're asked, okay, what are your values? Like, I don't know, I haven't really thought about that so much. How do you get that out of you, or get them to kind of delineate what their true values are for their brand?
Well, we actually did it with SheetGeek, because they're a client of ours, and we usually do it the same way, but it's just sitting down, and honestly, it sounds kind of simple, but we just show them a list of words and make them gut instinct within 3 minutes, prioritize the words that mean the most to them, then we dig into it, and then we drill it down, and then we run it through a series of filters to see like this or this, what's more important here or here, how will you use it, will you actually put time and money behind it, and then I think it's kind of like constantly challenging clients to make sure that they've chosen the right words. But initially, when people are starting for the first time, they just kind of need to be exposed to values in general. But a lot of times when we work with someone like SheetGeek, they've been around for a long time, they're already successful, and then we had to basically challenge Kylie, the founder, and say, these are the values you gave us, are they still valid? Tell us more about that, and then we have to kind of help them tweak those. I think, I've heard a lot of people say that values shouldn't change over time, but realistically, as your business matures, you'll have a better understanding of what makes you different, and then also what you value and what's actually realistic for you to put time, money, and energy behind. So I think it's always good to look at your values. They might tweak, because we literally only tweaked the SheetGeek values. They were still true. We just kind of developed them more.
It was a super important tweak though, because what Grant did when we had this workshop, it was probably one of the most pivotal points in our rebranding. Was this one day we sat down, and that's something you can do on your own as well, is like a list of descriptors and understanding what's the difference between our value being aggressive or assertive. There's a big difference between those two things. So our values when we came into our session with Grant was curiosity and bravery, like brave exploration. And what Grant did is they came in and said, okay, curious is one thing, and that's a good value to have, but what is different about SheetGeek is that we're relentlessly curious. Curious to the point that sometimes we get a little burnt because of it. And that is a way, more specific way to describe our value and how we approach a lot of our work. So yeah, coming in with some values, you have an understanding of what your business is about and what your community is about, but the process of the brand is really refining that and bringing it down to what exactly it is, because that'll also help show you what's different between you and your competitor. It comes back to those values.
I think values are such strong word to do if you're establishing or reestablishing your brand. And that's great that there are exercises you can do to actually develop that, but also keep it realistic too, right? You can't say we're the best at this in the world when you don't know. Maybe you are the best at this in the world, right? Really keep it realistic and go back to those ardent fans, those ardent consumers that are really supporting you, and see what they think about it too.
Well, and I think those values are scalable too. Like we have like a bakery client, one of their values is curiosity, and for them that means that, you know, every, let's say, I think it's every 2 weeks or maybe it's 1 day a month, they have a 4-hour session where they close shop. You know, she's spending money on the labor of everyone that works there, all the ingredients, and they just experiment with flavors. And that's what they're known for, is having really experimental flavors. So that's, you know, that's a big commitment for a small business, to shut down for 4 hours, get all the ingredients, you know, have all the staff there, and then just kind of play around. But I think that's what makes them different. So that's worth her time and money, because that's their differentiator compared to, you know, the 50 other bakeries that are out there.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, you both mentioned curious too. I'm just, you know, it's harkens back to that Ted Lasso scene. Be curious, right? You know, it won't be quoted to Walt Whitman anymore. It'll be a Ted Lasso. But that was such a great, you know, thing is, you know, driving that curiosity and bringing that out. I think it's amazing. Great. So it's got this brand established. It's been working for you for a number of years. What happens when it starts to not work as much? What happens when you think maybe we need to rebrand or rebuild this brand? What are the signals that people should look for if they're thinking about, or that would start them thinking about, maybe we need to change things a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, revenue is the biggest indicator, but I would say that if you start out and your revenue is not good, that's not a brand problem. You know, that's a business model problem. So I think that for us, you know, if someone has good revenue and then all of a sudden it's dwindling over time, it can mean a bunch of different things. It could mean that, you know, the landscape has changed and, you know, you need to reinvigorate your company. It could mean that you have an aging demographic that literally are not going to be around that much longer. We've had clients like that where we have to really change the way that they're featured towards a younger demographic, because literally they don't have as much of a demographic as they used to. So there's things like that. Yeah, and I think one of the ones that we have witnessed that we love working with is when brands have just matured. You know, I think that there's something to be said about when you have a small business, just like getting out there, starting it, testing your idea, testing your product, and getting a lot of feedback from your customers, and kind of just getting the pre-work done, and then, you know, developing your brand once you've kind of done all the dirty work. So we have a lot of brands like that that have kind of matured over time, and now they need a look that represents all the things they've learned, because I think there's wisdom that comes with that too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where we were at Sheet Geek. Sheet Geek's been around for 10 years, completely volunteer run, just Kylie, leading the team for so many years. And in 2021, when we approached the brand for a redesign, it was because we were moving into a team of 5, and we were moving away from like a training and upskilling to more support and community basis. And we needed a new look and a new brand to reflect that. There's a big difference between we teach you hard skills and we create space that you can feel welcome and feel a part of something. That there's a lot of change that comes to that. So maturity was one of the biggest things for us that signaled, yeah, it's time to get a new look and get a new sense of who we are.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for bringing up the example. I was going to ask you, like, what are some examples of some rebrands you've done? When I think about rebrand, the one that comes to mind more than anything is Old Spice, right? I mean, look what they did. That was crazy, right? It used to be that white bottle that was on your dad or your grandfather's, you know, bathroom counter, and now it's crazy guys riding whales and stuff. And so, and not that, you know, we're talking about anything that extreme, but like, what are some examples of some heavy rebrand work that you guys have been involved with?
I mean, I think that, you know, for us, one of the kind of local rebrands that we've been a part of that was kind of an honor was we rebranded Caesar's Steakhouse, which is kind of like a legendary steakhouse in Calgary for those who don't know. You know, and it was an interesting one for us because we do a lot of quirky, kind of like wild brands, and they are like a renowned, legendary, kind of traditional steakhouse.
Was this an Old Spice moment?
Yeah. No. I think we pitched them a sketch shrimp for one of their illustrations, and they didn't go for it. So, yeah, that was kind of a fun challenge for us because we have, you know, this very iconic brand that has pre-existing locations that are, you know, they're not going to redo, like, it costs them so much money to redo the interiors of these locations. So we had to kind of fit a new brand that would work with their literally 1950s interior. I think that, we based all of that on their values. So I think that's kind of, yes, would it have been fun to do like a weird shrimp illustration as their main logo? It would have been great, but we tried to do a cow as well. They didn't go for it. But I think, now we have this kind of updated brand that should target a younger demographic. We did their website, they're going to have a larger digital presence, and then slowly they'll update all these other things. But I think right now, like, not that I can't actually talk too much about it, but we're working in a golf brand, and this one will be fun because they are ready for quirky, like they're ready for bold, they're ready for wild, and they're also wanting to target a younger demographic that doesn't feel like they belong in the world of golf because of the stigmas and stereotypes around who golfs. And I think that is when we get to do like a full brand strategy where it's, like all of the logos, all of the packaging, all of the digital assets, all of the printed assets, help with the interiors, help with the marketing, help with their ads, like that's where you can really make an impact. And then you also have to have a leadership team that wants that. Because if there's too much pushback, then you kind of just end up somewhere in the middle. And I feel like that's where rebrands fails, when you're kind of like half in and half out.
Branding by committee, really, right? Yeah. Anything different that you would do for like a B2B brand versus a B2C brand? They tend to be a bit more conservative, right? They've got, business relationships to keep up and stuff. Anything to watch out for there, or
Yeah, I guess you could define Chic as B2B and B2C, right? We work with women in tech, but we also work with the big tech companies. So we have to be, not necessarily careful, but we have to be aware of how we're putting ourselves out there. We can't always just be going after the women in tech and being hyper quirky and using all this younger language and whatnot, because we have to consider the partners still need to see this and feel alignment with our brand. And it's super important what you're talking about with Caesars, in that you can't alienate a current audience through a rebrand by going after a new market. And a really good way to avoid that is understanding rebranding isn't just new colors and trending fonts. It goes deeper into values, and values should align, whether it's your old demographic, your new demographic you're going after, values should align with everybody. So yeah, it's about coming back to those values. They should reflect what the B2B customers you're working with and B2C. So relentless curiosity, that should really define a really great tech startup and someone looking to work in tech. So finding those pieces that overlap is where you're also going to create the best community of people that support your brand, finding those intersections.
Yeah, and I think, that's for us when we're working with someone, it doesn't really matter if they're B2B or B2C, our process is still always the same, because we're always looking for that anchor that is the authentic value that we think will pull the most people. There's lots of examples of huge companies that have spent hundreds of millions of dollars redoing a logo just for the sake of redoing a logo, and there's no reason behind it. And like Gap, we talked about before, they redid their logo, I think it was in 2010, and they spent $110 million redoing their logo, which many people have seen, and it's shocking that it cost that much money. But they redid their logo, and they had so much backlash on this logo, they changed it back 7 days later. And there's lots of examples like that. I think that when people are rebranding just because they're like, you know what, we need a new logo, that's the wrong approach. There has to be some kind of steeped meaning behind it. And I think, from all the research that we've done at our company, it always comes down to those champions and those, you're kind of like, your nerdiest nerds of customers. How do you authentically connect to them in a way that is actually real for you? Because that will never fail. That's when, if you can really dig into that and find that thing, and I think that only comes through experience and asking them. You have to really connect with your audience. And sometimes we literally put 2 different designs in front of the audience that our clients are serving and ask them, which one do you like better? And I feel like a lot of design firms would advise against that. But for us, those are the people buying it. That's who we want to target, so why wouldn't we just ask them? I think that's, you know, if you can dig into your values and what makes you different, that kind of transcends any industry-specific process.
Yeah, it's funny when you just ask people, right? I mean, you're right, a lot of companies, especially bigger companies, this kind of circle of overthinking won't do that, right? I think they're sometimes afraid of what they'll get back, right? You actually talk to your customers, and so I think that's very important. Lauren, you also mentioned too, like those values, and digging those values, they have to transcend, right? If you nailed your values the right way, they should transcend time, they should transcend your customer base, they should really be viable no matter what, right? You can tweak them, but they really should exist. Awesome. Okay, so let's now shift a little bit. Built the brand, we've rebranded, we've rebuilt the brand. Let's talk about social media, right? It's become so important in how brands of any size, businesses of any size, and across the industry, B2B, B2C, market, go-to-market, especially from an acquisition standpoint, it's become looked at as an acquisition engine. How do you bring your brand to life, in those channels, in those feeds? What do how do you start, and what are your big go-tos in terms of making sure that comes through?
Great question. The thing that is great about social media rebranding versus your website or your storefront is social media gives you way more opportunity to try new things and then iterate and then try something new. The website redevelopment can take a long time. Putting up a new Instagram post and seeing, does this messaging land? You're gonna get pretty instant feedback of, no one liked my post. Okay, maybe this didn't resonate as much as I thought it was going to. Let's try something different tomorrow. So really bringing your brand into the social media space is a really great way to start experimenting with that. Or like Ethan said, put the two options out there for them. See what they think. Maybe don't explicitly ask them. Try one thing one day. If you get a comment that says this is really awesome, that lets you know. So yeah, bringing a brand into social media, of course, comes back to your values as well. So the PDF that we got from Grant, that is very long. It took me a long time to get through the first day we got it. It is pinned to the top of my Google Drive. And so every time I open my workspace, I'm usually opening that PDF and scrolling through to just get an idea of, okay, what is the look I'm going for here? What's the language I'm going to use when I'm putting this together? The final brand that you get, it should never stop when you stop working with the agency that created it, when they send it to you. It should never die at the bottom of your emails. It should be living, breathing. You should be making notes on it. I have many notes on my personal version of it, and it should be a central part going back to it. What are my colors? What are my values? And always bringing that into anything you're creating, social media, websites, whatever it is. And kind of the how to do that is going to depend on what your brand is and where your customers live. But yeah, going back to that brand, rebrand doesn't stop. A brand doesn't ever stop. It's continuously growing, and as new people come into the community, they're experiencing the brand for the very first time. So it's important to remember that it's a living, breathing brand. It doesn't die out. So social media is a really great way to start introducing your brand.
Yeah, and I think too, we don't really do social media at our firm, but essentially what you're saying is A/B testing, which we do with ads, and I find that really interesting because it's such a beautiful way to know really quickly what resonates. We have a linen client in Vancouver, and we just finished some ads for them, and we got feedback from the actual ad buyers who do the technical stuff because we are not the technical team. But they sent us, there's this one ad that we had that was like a winter, cozy ad, and it was a summer hot ad, that's what it was. It was a summer hot linen ad, and they were running it in some of the coldest times of the year, and it still has a 5 times return on ad spend rate, which is really good. Typically 2 to 3 is good. And we wouldn't know that if we didn't test and test and test and tweak and tweak. And so if you don't have, a $25,000 a month ad spend, social media is such a great way to do that. and say, you know, to try some language, you know, it doesn't go anywhere, you can look at the engagement, delete it, try something new, delete it, try something new. No one's paying attention to what you archive on Instagram, so.
Yeah, good point. Great insight. So that brings me to a whole other bank of questions. I mean, and we see this at Square, we see this with sellers that we're talking to too in terms of social media, where you kind of get caught up in, you know, is it all about acquisition? Is it all about brand? Should they be separate? Even at Square, we have like, where's the call to action? It's like, hang on, we want to get something that's a bit more emotional out there, right? So what's the role of, you know, creating emotion, especially within social media? How does that work? And can that work in conjunction with, say, a strong call to action or an acquisition play?
Absolutely. Your posts on social media should not be sell, sell, sell. That is the opposite of building a brand. That is building an advertisement. When you're building these communities, which is this whole conversation, this whole panel, when you're building communities, you're not just focused on what your business needs. You need sales, we know that. What does your customer need? Beyond just your product, what else can you give them in terms of value, inspiration, connection with other people? That's super important, and that's what's gonna create those nerdy nerds, brand loyal people. If you think of a brand that you love, a company that you love, and no matter what they do, you're gonna keep buying from them. It's not the product necessarily that keeps you going back to them. It's the entire experience, and that can live on social media too. That's a process of, you know, a lot of my clients I work with, and at Cheeky, I say like maximum like 1 selling post a week. And that's it. Everything else should just be giving value. That's how you're going to gain your followers. That's how, you know, when something goes viral and someone clicks on your profile and decides that they're going to follow you and if you're going to get an acquisition from it, what you have there in your bank of content, if they just feel continuously sold to, I'm not going to follow you. That's all I'm going to see. But if I go on there and I see top tips for this or reasons why you need to do this in this niche, that's what's going to make me think, oh, there's actually a lot of value. I am going to follow this. I want this a part of my feed. So yeah, it's a lot of a value exchange between the content that you're giving, and eventually that will lead to acquisitions if you're targeting the right people and you have the right content.
Yeah, and I think right now we're in an interesting time because people are more aware than ever of kind of being performative or like greenwashing and that kind of stuff. And I think now is the time to actually back up, you know, your ad language and your values in action, because people are going to call you out on it. And I also feel like consumers are a lot more awake to language being used. They don't want to hear BS. They want to see companies standing up and making a difference and taking action. And I think that that's just a healthier environment for people to enter into anyway. So I would, if I was starting a new business that, you know, had a new start, it would be that. I would be really focused on, especially if it was a product-based business. Like Patagonia is a perfect example. They have done so much work in the environmental space. Then the founder basically gave his company away in support of that goal. And I think that's, I mean, not everyone can do that exactly, but I think that that's the way of the future. People want to see companies making a difference. So
I think that's so true, especially what we see. The younger your audience gets, they really want to support companies that, you know, stand for something. So it's really becoming more about who you stand for, who you help. It's really going to go a long way into building your brand. And way back early days in social media, I was working with a company I was working with a lot of car dealers, and they wanted to put their whole inventory on Facebook. And we said, no, we don't do that, right? And we found, talking to one dealer who's actually in Windsor, so he uses his brand's vans to drive people to their chemotherapy at the local hospital. And I was like, that's what we put on social media. That's what we tell people about, and that's what builds your community. You think about car dealers, they're stalwarts in their communities, right? I mean, these are businesses that go back generations, and that's kind of what we keyed on in terms of how you build that brand and really draw customers through your actions and not just the fact that we've got all these cars for sale. So,
exactly.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, we done? No, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it, so-
that was a really insightful conversation, so thank you both. Unfortunately, we don't have time for Q&A, but we will be going into a cocktail hour after our keynote speaker.